Welcome to Between the Rig, a podcast hosted by Pushbox CrossFit. We're all about fitness and bringing you direct opinions wrapped in humor and a touch of, did they really just say that? We aim to help you understand more about coaching, gym ownership, and what it takes to get the most out of your fitness, mindset, and lifestyle, both inside and outside the gym. Let's get into it. All right, welcome back, team, to Between the Rig, a podcast hosted by Pushbox CrossFit. We love talking about anything and all things fitness. We got the boys in the house. What's up, guys?
What's going on? How are you, sir?
So good. Yeah, thanks for being here. I was just kind of looping back some of the old podcast episodes, mainly because I don't mind listening to myself. That probably says a lot about me. And I was starting to notice a trend that we sometimes reference back to the kind of like pyramid that we would see at a level one in CrossFit. And I started to realize, well, maybe some people don't understand what that is. And I figured kind of post-open or kind of like the CrossFit season, you know, for most all of us, it's over. We're not going to the games.
Very much over.
Almost there. I figured it might be a good time for us to kind of revisit that, explain what it is, and kind of view it through different lenses of, okay, how do we reassess where I'm at in my CrossFit performance career based on the open or quarterfinals or semifinals? I'm newer. What does that even mean? How do I approach things? Hey, I do most of my training in open gym. I'm hitting plateaus, things like that. So I think we can kind of attack this from different angles and just kind of break down what it is, what it means, and how to kind of perceive this and maybe go about things in our own individual training, and could give some insight on how us as coaches view programming. So the main thing will be on the theoretical hierarchy of athlete development and what that pyramid is. We'll kind of pick apart what those things are. We won't go into this crazy detail on the nutrition and on the sport, but we're going to touch upon all that. And then I'd love to get to some of the questions that our members and listeners were so generous to send in. In fact, I'm going to start off with one. And this might be the most important one of the podcast. And it was sent to us from a person. So thank you, person.
Yeah, anonymous.
I never know if they want to say anything.
Sure.
Where do CrossFit shoes and matching outfits fall on the athlete development pyramid, and what % increase do they add to performance? I'll start with you guys.
I mean, you know, you look good, play good aspects, right? I mean, I play a lot of baseball, and, you know, there's a lot of swag in baseball. I carry more swag in baseball than I do in CrossFit. I mean,
listeners, if you're not watching this, he's actually currently wearing a forearm sweatband, Air Jordan, right now.
Looks vintage.
So swag.
This is actually only a year old.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
But no, I mean, you know, look good, play good. If it whatever makes you feel better, great. And there's different degrees of it. I am not to your degree. Like, I'll show up in the gym not
Okay,
matching
shots
at
fired.
all. Not shots
90
fired,
seconds in the podcast.
It's a good thing, man. You know, you love your shoes, you love your swag, you love your shirts. You know, I'm you know, more of a, you know, gritty kind of, you know, holes in actually there is a hole in this shirt and a bleach stain currently right now. So I don't know, it's all to different degrees.
Now that you brought it up, there's a rad drop tomorrow. Go out and get your shoes. Hopefully they're listening and we'll become sponsored. Now that you brought it up, Josh, all your fault.
Okay. After the spot, am I the only one that thinks that rad is, you know, they're ugly shoes? I'm sorry I said it.
Everybody knows how I feel about that.
I don't like it.
We're going to ask him to edit your face and just pixelate it with like a dark voice.
Right. I don't like it. Anyways.
As if like you're like in witness protection.
Yeah, sorry.
Rad is ugly.
Hot take.
Hey man, teach their own.
Yeah.
What about you?
You guys know, like, I'm pretty simple when it comes to, like, if I can wear it, like, I'm going to work out in it for the most part. That's most of my clothes anyway. Corey's like, get new clothes. And I'm like, no. So, I agree. Look good, play good though. I think it does actually play into your performance, because if you're out there and like you're on a team, like there is that like aspect of
baseball team with matching plaid uniforms.
Well, even like
happening?
Look at all the people we just did a competition, right? Like how many people were wearing matching things. You are now affiliating yourself with these people. There's camaraderie. You want to work hard for those people, right? It's not just an individual thing when you're doing that. So I think that it plays into performance for sure.
So you're saying you dress differently when you train versus when you're competing either in a
100%.
sport or
Yeah,
CrossFit?
definitely.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
Yeah, like when you go to baseball practice, like you're probably just wearing.
No, I'll wear sweatpants.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
yeah.
But when you're out on the field, you are now part of this team. You are now like playing for them, not just for yourself.
Yeah.
Have you guys been to sijmu.com? Studyijustmadeup.com.
Oh, no. I was like,
Yeah.
what?
So in a study I just
Yeah.
made up, it's 100%.
100%. Wow.
It's the whole pyramid.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter about how you eat.
Oh, where it
about
fits
how
in
you
the
work
pyramid.
out.
Yeah.
It's on the bottom. It is the number one
Sure.
important. No,
Yeah.
no. I think we all agree. There's something about like, I like am proud of like wearing that. Now that maybe that's more uniform based, but
Sure.
I think shoes matter for the fact of like how do you feel good. I mean, you know, especially in your job, like you're a big believer in foundation up. So if your feet are smashed in or jammed just because you're trying to fit the fad of a shoe that's going around, like Trish really doesn't like the Nanos, but likes the Metcons. Some people don't like the Metcons, but like
Right.
you know, so I genuinely like the way Rats fit my feet. All ha-has aside, like I do like how they fit.
Yeah.
So yeah, great question. I think we're probably going to stop the podcast now because that's
we're
the only
done.
thing we need to talk
Nailed
about. No. All right. So let's get into this, again, theoretical hierarchy of development. And we're not fancy enough, or I don't know how to put up visuals. So if you're listening, I'm going to try to do my best to describe it. It is going to be a pyramid. Starts at the very bottom. We have nutrition. And from there, it goes up to metabolic conditioning. It then goes up to gymnastics. Pardon me. And then it goes to weightlifting / throwing. And then finally, the very top of that pyramid is sport. So I want to quickly just run. Oh,
I
you
have it
have
on my
the
phone.
visual.
I have a visual on my phone. You may have to zoom in on your phone
Yeah.
because it's on a phone. So, but you know, it's there.
That's so
Yeah.
meta. It's like a phone within a phone and a phone. So I want to just quickly read the description and definition that CrossFit has of this. If you go to, I think, What is Fitness, posted back in 2002, a publication, this is how they define it. And then let's kind of break it down, interpret it ourselves, and then say, do we still think it holds up to nowadays training? Everything, like most things, evolve, things like that. And kind of, again, I'll slip in some questions that I was given before the podcast and see if it kind of works its way in. So when it comes to nutrition, they have nutrition is the foundation of the pyramid. The quality of an athlete's diet influence metabolism and therefore the molecular foundations of muscle, bone, and the nervous system. For this reason, any training system that does not consider and duly correct an athlete's diet will be suboptimal. Long-term training depends upon a solid base of nutritional support. Do we have any initial reactions, or do you want me to run through it all and then
No,
we just
we can talk about that.
cool?
Obviously, nutrition's crazy important, right? Like
Super important.
you are what you eat.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but like if you don't have the fuel to move your body and you're trying to do high intensity workouts, weightlifting, powerlifting, whatever, and you're not fueling yourself properly, then you're not gonna be able to perform well. End of story, right? Like,
Yeah.
there is that whole this is more like weight loss kind of conversation, but the idea of like fasted cardio being superior to fed cardio, which is hilarious because that's not true. And you need calories, you need carbohydrates, you need glucose and glycogen and all the things to burn while you're
Yeah.
doing things. You know, that's how you produce force and energy and the things around it. So nutrition's very important. Yeah. I struggle with it being like the base of the
Ooh.
pyramid, but
Oh, you got a head shift from Josh. I like
it's,
this. This
you
is what
know,
we're talking. This is what we're here talking about. Oh,
I
no.
think, well, and you said earlier, like, should it have evolved? Well, I think there should be additions too. And I think one of the kind of the questions that's coming up later is like sleep, recovery.
Yeah.
Where do those things fit in?
So let's save that because I want
I'll come
to.
back
I
to
want to
it.
maybe talk as a group about how we could, if we were to, add to or take away or reshuffle the order. And let's just kind of break down these 5 points here because I 100% agree. There's, I don't want to say missing like they weren't thinking about it by any
Sure.
means, but I think we need to kind of take in recognition of there's so many moving pieces here.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think I told you today earlier off camera, Josh, we met up for programming that my client, when you and Micah popped in this morning, was like, man, is Josh leaner?
I am leaner.
He is leaner.
dude,
We all
right?
know.
Yep.
We can see
And
it.
so, like you were talking about, I'm eating for weight loss. We've kind of talked about this in other podcasts about there's now just studies out here. It's just like you eat less than you consume. Now, that doesn't mean your composition is going to shift maybe how you want it, right? I mean, we're talking about just an overall caloric deficit from either higher fat, lower carb, or higher carb, lower fat. But then there's like, I want certain things to pop and show. I need to fuel performance. Most of what we're doing, glycogen fueled. So we want to make sure like carbs are not an enemy. We just want to make sure we understand how to go about them, and there's different ways and timing to eat certain things. But you seem to be putting a little more focus on that, and I think it's going awesome. So congrats.
No, thank you. Yeah, I mean, to just kind of note on that, what Adam said in my head nod was, I look at this pyramid and even nutrition is probably the most important thing in life. You need fuel, you need food, you need water to just live.
Yeah, shoes,
Right, like-
nutrition. I agree.
Yeah, shoes, nutrition. So, it doesn't matter your goal if you're cutting, bulking, trying to be an athlete. Like you need the energy. So for me, I have been losing weight, and the hard part is, me trying to be calorie deficit, but also being able to perform in the gym. So understanding that this is going to be a long-term goal. This isn't going to be like a fast drop, because I don't want to just like, I want to say easily, because calorie deficit is definitely hard, but I could just be like, I'm only going to eat 1,200 calories a day. I don't care what I do in the gym. It's definitely going to affect my performance in the gym. I'm going to lose some muscle mass. But I don't want that. I want this to be a gradual thing. So it's taken me
Landing.
soft landing. So it's taken me close to 4 or 5 months to lose 15, 20 pounds, which is great for me. But some people are like, that's a long time. Like,
I mean, this is probably the most, like, there's so much data out here, but everyone views this through like the personal feelings lens, right? Of like, oh, okay. I mean, and you'll see this in, again, CrossFit's definition and stuff like that. It's like, it's eat for essentially the energy in which you're going to burn. Like if you're a car, you're only putting enough gas in to drive that car. But I think a lot of people eat because they're stressed, eat because they're emotionally going through something, eat with their eyes and not their stomach and realize, oh crap, like there's so many factors here. So I think a lot of issues can kind of be solved if we view things through like, I need to move more, and then I'm going to eat for the quality of my performance. I think a lot of these things would honestly work most of itself out if we view things through that lens. But I think, again, I kind of mentioned in the last podcast with JD that I think a lot of people have this really busy cram life kind of pie chart, and they shove health and wellness and fitness in, and they try to jam it in. And now if we're telling them, by the way, we got to eat to fuel that properly, it's probably not going to go well.
Well,
we're
it's
just
not
like, I
gonna
just
be
don't want to die
quality.
today, so here's
Yeah.
something. And we're like,
Yeah.
why is this not going well? So that's, and again, we can always loop in and out of these things, but I think we understand that like quality nutrition,
Yes.
right? Like we need calories to keep us alive, and we need, if we want to lose weight, to eat less than we burn. But then there's like, that's the umbrella. Let's take a more detailed look. Protein intakes. And again, let's loop in and out there. But I think a lot of people, biggest mistake is they lack protein intake and the quality of their sources of just overall food.
There was something I saw, just a random thing where there were dietitians telling women that they only needed like 40 grams of protein a day, which is
just bonkers.
ridiculous, right? Like that's not enough to fuel muscle protein synthesis.
As the youth would say, just a bunch of bozos.
that's not even breakfast.
And it's one of those things where it's, the recently studies have been showing like just increasing protein intake increases muscle mass or lean body mass and decreases body fat percentage just by eating better, just by eating more protein, and so these people are like, well, I get enough protein. I'm like, how much? I ask
I've
a lot
never
of my
met
patients
anyone
that.
who blows me away with the amount of protein they eat.
No.
They actually recorded for 2 days, and I'm like, oh my God,
Yeah.
this is just
You're
laughably
missing
low. Yeah.
50 plus grams probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. So most people are, and we live in a country where like protein deficiencies really shouldn't be a thing, but people are, and so it's kind of interesting that is the problem. But we also live in a country where carbohydrates and fats are cheap, and so they're easy to get.
I mean, I always say you go to like a cafe or, not just Starbucks, but any event like that, and most of their stuff is beige.
Yep.
Right? And the things that are colored are like cake pops.
Ooh, my
I'm
son
like-
loves a cake pop.
Right? But he I don't know, he probably burns that. I don't know.
No,
right?
he's
Like,
fine.
Yeah.
Children are different.
He's doing great.
Yeah, he needs to eat
Yeah.
more carbs and protein anyway, but that's
Yeah.
a different story.
so let's move on to metabolic conditioning, right? That's right above nutrition. That is the second level of the pyramid, relates to cardiovascular sufficiency. Without effective metabolic conditioning, an athlete will fatigue prematurely. As a result, the athlete's strength and coordination will not reach their full potential, and further development can be blunted. A baseline of cardiovascular capacity must be present for success in most sports and other physical activities. So this one, I think we're going to start getting up the pyramid, and within each section, I think can have its own pyramid.
Yeah.
And in fact, we went with weightlifting seminar, gymnastics seminar. They touch upon things a little differently. And again, you can kind of almost Tony Stark, Iron Man, that like invisible screen out and really zoom in. But we were kind of talking in the car. There's cardiovascular health.
Right.
And then there is, like cyclical monostructural, like I'm on the Berg, I'm on the Erg, I'm on the Skirg, I'm all the Ergs.
Yeah.
And then the fucking Echo Bike, the AC, we call the awesome cycle. No one agrees with that though.
No.
Running, swimming, things like
Yeah,
that.
monostructural things, sure, right? Like that's getting your heart rate up. It is cardiovascular health. Where I disagree with this, and we've had this conversation, is when you start adding load on top of people and ask them to move a barbell when
there's,
they're
like,
under fatigue.
CrossFit endurance is,
CrossFit endurance is completely different than me riding a bike for an hour, right? Like my body's not taking that force, and you need to be able to control those forces. And so that's where I have my bitch with this pyramid, is that when you're in CrossFit, it's not just monostructural, it's not just endurance training, it's not just cardiovascular training, it's a lot of these other short cycles as well. And if you don't have the capacity structurally, so soft tissue wise, then that's where we start to see injuries. And because I come from a more of a preventative side of things, I look at this piece as being needs to be switched with the gymnastics part that we're about ready to talk about.
Yeah.
So
I would argue that I don't argue with the fact that what you just said as far as putting the load on. I would say you, as a coach, we need to be better at saying, hey, you're not ready for that.
for sure.
And just like overhead squats, you learn when you're doing, I think it was L2, L1, whatever. If you can't handle a barbell without like externally rotating your shoulders, just do a PVC pipe. Learn to put the load on. It's zero load at all. So we should really learn how to, yes, properly do those movement functions without hurting the person, but we still need to prioritize metabolic fitness.
I don't disagree,
Yeah.
because we actually were just kind of chatting about this as well. And when we start talking about like longevity and VO2 maxes and capacity that way, for just being a human being that lives to be 80 years old, you need that anyway. And so it's very, like, I don't disagree with it being as big of a chunk of the, we'll say, pie or pyramid as it is. It's just when we start talking CrossFit, it is now becoming problematic because these people want to work out under fatigue when they're loading themselves, and it's not in a way that they can handle.
And I think this is why we kind of want to break this down, because I think they see that, they're like, okay, conditioning. I'm like, well, hold on. If we're talking like life longevity, the two biggest things that are prevalent in studies is VO2 max and bone density. So output and skeletal loading, right, is how we get that. But how do we do it in the methodology and training and sport even of CrossFit?
Sure.
So let me give the gymnastics definition. Let's just talk about these two for a second, because I think they can go back and forth and together and separated. And so the gymnastics focuses on an athlete's spatial awareness and body control. Before attempting to control an external object, for example, a barbell, wall ball, an opponent even, an athlete should first possess the strength, flexibility, coordination, balance, and agility to move his or her own body weight through many different body positions and movement combinations with sound mechanics and confidence.
So here's where I think gymnastics should be a bigger portion, but I almost think it should be like comparable to metabolic conditioning, where like we've now changed the food pyramid because it sucked. And we've now moved it, like they moved some things next to each other, where I'm like, if we could drop gymnastics down to being,
if it wasn't a layering,
it doesn't need to be a layer. It should be part of almost metabolic conditioning, where it's like, can you get your heart rate up, keep it up, move well, and move your body well at this, like in the same aspect before you start loading it, right? Like, and that's what it even says, like before you start putting external loads onto these tissues, you need to be able to control these things.
I guess I agree with that, because in order to, get the heart rate up, you need to be able to move your body.
Yeah.
Like even if it's just walking.
Right.
You know, or walking up the stairs. Like that's, you can argue that is gymnastics.
Yeah.
You know, because you're moving your body. So,
One of the big arguments now in the rehab world is, are people, how do I want to put this? Are there bad positions? Or are there just positions that your body is not stimulated and adapted to? Right? Like, so if you,
Without having your background there, I would not automatically, I instinctively lean towards probably yes. There's just like I think we can agree probably knees don't want to go this way, they want to go that way, but
they do that.
but clearly if they can, they can.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So shouldn't you stimulate them to so they are ready for that position, right? Like that's the idea. Now, I still kind of believe there are bad positions, right? Like there are certain things that, you know, maybe you don't want to do with your body.
can you give an example?
Like honestly, I'm having a hard time with it because I still kind of believe that like, oh, if I stimulate this enough and I create this adaptation, then my body should be ready to handle this in a way of like linear progressions and stimulus of soft tissues and even like.
Let me throw an example out and tell me what you instinctively think, because I hear this a lot when I look at CrossFitters posts, and they're like, when I'm done competing at a high level as an athlete, I'm not going to do GH sit-ups anymore.
And
it's I can see that because it's such like a whoa movement for like maybe the average Joe, but I'm like, I love them, and I kind of fall into the belief that if we have consistency in our training with intentional volume and loading and a certain frequency, there's a certain adaptation that's not like, what? I think we've all done a GHC sit-up for the first time and like, oh crap, I forgot I haven't done these in like 2 months. And then you're thinking like, last time I did 50, I'll go 60. And you're like, I need a hospital bed.
Yeah.
Or like sneezing is the worst thing in the world. So
part of me thinks, now this is coming back from, again, the things that I know, but it's their inability to get out of an extension compression stabilizing strategy. So when they go from an extension position to a flexion position, they are moving as one segment through their lumbar spine, and they're not getting that. So they're like, oh, my back hurts every time I do this. And it becomes very stiff, where you're trying to move your trunk through space while you're from an extension position and then go to a flexion position, and they don't have the capacity to do so. And this is purely a compensation. So I could see that. But somebody like yourself that has the ability to do those things, it feels good. They're like, shout out to Aiden.
That's what's up. Shout out me.
So, like, of course you feel good doing it. You're like, yeah, like I have the mobility to do this. I have the stability to do this.
I have the shoes
and
to do this.
he's got the fucking fly-ass shoes to do this. And so it's fine.
Yeah.
But I also am with them where I'm like, do you need to?
Yeah.
Like there's other ways to get this stimulus, you know, like it's one of those where it's like, is the juice worth the squeeze? You know?
Way to bring that phrase in.
I like it.
Well done.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think when we went to the gymnastics seminar, shout out Jess Estrada, they were like, the gymnastics community, through our lens, views it just like they flop them. I think the reality is, if we're looking at it through now the application of CrossFit methodology, not just human longevity health of, hey, everyone should be walking some and get on a bike, guys, and go for your steps in a day, cardiovascular, they're probably pretty even here, because within their, again, perspective, it's even like, hey, before you're strict, you better master almost like static. Okay, great. Now we can add strict. Okay, great. Now we can add this kipping and ballistic nature to things. So this is where, again, I kind of like expand a screen out. Even within that, there's their own pyramid. So now there's like a pyramid within a pyramid that's now we're probably reshuffling down to, because one of my favorite things to do that no one ever wants to really do with me is, I mean, I don't know, a little while ago, I remember Mark at Open Gym was like, hey, what are you doing? And it was 20 rounds of 500-meter row, 1 minute rest. And that was it. And on paper, you're like, no, I just want to clean and jerk, you know? But I'm like, I want to see if I can consistently be within 1 second north or south of that split. And just like, you know, a 153 average. And just smooth, consistent. And like, there's a benefit to just training that base there.
100%.
And then there's like, oh, I need to hit these echo bike sprints kind of hard. And there's, again, we're talking like the base of the triangle and the peak of the triangle. And I'm more referring now to VO2 max versus like zone 2 and things like that.
Right.
But I think like you're saying, most of these body weight and cardiovascular applications that we're seeing is not just you going for a walk outside. It's we're doing it in a Metcon.
Yeah.
And once we lose that capacity, anyone who's learned butterfly from kipping, your heart rate jacks up. So sometimes I'll intentionally kip in order not to elevate my heart rate if the volume or the workout stimulus doesn't make sense or doesn't give me enough of an advantage.
Right.
If it's like 50 pull-ups, sure. If it's like 7, and then there's crazy something else, I might kip just to have that inhale, exhale, calming, and I now can compose myself when I have to pick up a barbell for an overhead squat, and I got to stabilize my midline, which is all core. But if I'm like, and I'm like huffing and puffing, I can't control that midline stability and breathing pattern. So yeah. All right, let's get to weightlifting and throwing. And again, we'll go back to everything here. The 4th level considers the control of external objects, weightlifting, throwing, things like that. The capacities built at the metabolic conditioning and gymnastics levels can next be applied to an object beyond the confines of the athlete's own body. Controlling external objects often relies on gross motor patterns that act as gateways for transferring power from the core of the body to the extremities. Once mastered, the skill can be refined for the nuance and specific patterns necessary for individual sports. And just today, I saw Dave Castro has his own kind of like podcast, and I always think about this. I wish I was in the games just to do this one event, and it was the softball throw. And he was actually saying that apparently Glassman he barely ever chimed in on the games except for like 3 events, and this was one of them. And I guess he wanted to see it done dominant and non-dominant. And Castro and someone else was like, let's just stick with dominant. Because if you saw, I think like Spieler and Kalipa, I mean, it was like the ball went behind them.
Yeah, I already heard it was a little bit.
Half the people had like a right arm throw with a right leg in front, but just like they've never done it.
Yeah.
And then you think like, well, this is so light. If you ask anyone to right now just pick up a ball and throw at max effort, their arms are going to probably go sailing with them, or they're going to like tear an oblique or something.
Yeah.
So it's not just about how heavy is this absolute load, but controlling this. I mean, the explosive and expressive power and coordination to accurately throw something.
Yeah, they had to throw it like within, I think it was like a 10-yard thing, right? What year was that?
I think I don't know, like early 2012 or something. Because Froning was, I think, an ex-baseball player, and he was like dope.
Yeah,
and just hucked that thing.
Yeah,
and some people, I'm like, they've
never thrown a ball. Like
weightlifting sport and sports, which we're about to get into, are not the same thing.
Right.
And so I think what I want to throw in now is this is not a conversation and a visual pyramid to say you have to perfect, master, and pass a test in order to even think about doing something above. Like, I don't need you to demonstrate perfect ski form in order to do an air squat or a push-up. But this is where I would ask everyone to truly take a look within themselves and their performance. And some of it's like, data points from the open. Like, man, I really fell to pieces on this one. We'll look at what this one was. It weightlifting? Is it gymnastics? Is it just like pitter patters? Usually the level we feel deficient at, we can actually take a look back to the layer before that, and actually something's probably worse off there that's impacting quality of the level above.
Absolutely.
If your bodies are in shit positions, then why do you think it's going to go well with weightlifting?
Right.
If we're having a hard time moving ourselves, and this is a very sometimes sensitive topic for people, it's not an auto fix, but it's really a big part of it. And this has nothing to do with, I find you cute or societal, except no. If you are having a hard time doing a pull-up, like a strict pull-up or running, things like that, let's look at our body weight. And if we have more than less, it's going to take more energy to move that. And if more of that more is not good, then we have less of the good stuff to move that. And so, I mean, that's why I think in all sports, we start to see a certain ideal body type or this and that. Doesn't mean it can't be done or great fitness and athleticism can't be accomplished. But when moving our own body through space and time, like I'm 5'11". One would argue, just me, I'm 6 foot on good days. And I'm 200 pounds, maybe like 203. That if I'm 30% body fat or 10% body fat, there's a difference. It's not just 200 pounds is being moved.
Right.
There's more lean body mass, more muscle on there, less things that are just like not helping me at all. Like, it's going to be easier for that. And then if I was 30% or 10% at 185, it's going to be a different story. So most of us, I think that's sometimes why that nutrition's on that base level. It helps for recovery, helps for growth, and it helps for kind of like, just weight to body weight ratios. That's going to help us move ourselves better, and then we move ourselves better, especially in stable positions. Let's not worry about like butterfly pull-ups and handstand walking yet. Then it's going to be easier to put load on top of that.
That was the driving factor on why I wanted to lose weight. Besides, looking better naked.
Yeah.
Which we all want.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. But I'm already pretty good looking guy, so
Yeah. No, I know.
But we all want you to look better. Yeah.
We all want to look better. But it was just to be better at gymnastics. I was, pull-ups. I want to get better at pull-ups, and just being 275 pounds was just too much.
It's a lot of mass to move.
No, I mean, it was great because I was putting up a lot of weight on the barbell, but at the compromise of just like running 100 meters was just like, God, I could feel every single ounce of my body move. And it hurt my ankles, it hurt my knees. It was just just losing that 15 to 20 pounds, muscle ups are back. I can string more pull-ups together. It's just, I just feel better and lighter. And it's just, I'm not done yet. I'm hoping to lose another 10, 15 pounds. I don't want to be 200. I'd rather be like 230. And that's my good weight.
Weight
You're
and
large,
shoes.
you're
Just
large human,
shots
though.
fired.
Yeah, right. Like,
No, nothing wrong with 230. You're 5'11". That's a great weight. For 5'11".
Yeah.
So
Yeah, for 5'11" 3/4, it's
3/4.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good. Okay, so let's just talk about something that people still refuse to accept. Is like, I'm just gonna work out more to fix problems and bad diets.
God, I've done that so much. It took me 40 years to figure this out. Well, 39 and a half years. I used to always try to be like, if I just work out more, I can eat more terrible.
yeah.
I can
Right.
have, I can have this ho-ho and yeah.
Or I can drink more, or I don't need I'll just train harder in the gym. And the thing is that we very so often we see these professional athletes, if it's just CrossFit, whatever, we always see their workouts like, well, they're training this hard. We don't really see how much they rest and how much they really like what their nutrition's like. We maybe have like a glimpse at it, but like
It's hard in the vlog, YouTube, Instagram world, because you'll even see like, oh, I need a quick sugar absorption, and you'll get like Daniel Brandon popping some like Mott's fruit snacks. I'm like, yeah, but like in the moment they're like, I need a quick fuel that isn't like a gut bomb of calories. This isn't like, ooh, that's what she had for breakfast.
Yeah.
They're all pretty the same. There's no trick. Can I say this? Like, if you're the person who's like ever Googled tricks to knock that shit off,
Yeah. So
like, just
this reminds
accept
me-
reality.
Yeah, this reminds like most people believe that like lifting weights builds muscle, right? Lifting weights is actually the opposite of that. It's a catabolic effect. You are actually tearing down those things. You are burning calories. You are burning the nutrients from those tissues. And the actual anabolic state of that is you sleeping, you recovering, you eating well, you hydrating, you doing all of the shit outside of the gym actually gains you the...
But I don't feel it right away, Adam. Can I just do more shitty power cleans with my crotch
can.
forward and elbows down?
You can. I'm.
By the way, that was me making fun of people who say things like that. Not 5'11" 3/4 Aiden. Yeah. So let me just give the sport definition, and because we've had some questions on sleep, and let's now kind of talk about the pyramid as a whole, and through the perspective of if we're just getting into this, if we're hitting plateaus, or how we assess our performance in the open quarterfinal season, and even like getting older, right? So the sport now would be, with this foundation developed, the athlete can then safely and easily focus general physical preparedness, or GPP, on the specialized task required of specific sports. The novel requirements of sport, new body positions and movement patterns, dynamic control of external objects, fatigue, and other physiological stressors, further serve to refine the athlete's skill set and general capacity. For this reason, athletes are encouraged to regularly learn and play new sports. And that last sentence was actually in the 100 kind of words in one of the earlier publications Glassman put out, because one of the questions I'll get to is, well, if CrossFit is your sport, but they did not initially mean sport as in CrossFit the sport. I'll say this now: CrossFit is not a competitive program. It's a training program. It's a health and wellness program. I think we have a sport of CrossFit within it, and that gets often viewed as like, oh, well, that's what we're doing. And I still perceive myself as an athlete. I want to be competitive, but it is not supposed to be this like, I'm going to the games every day training thing, right? That's why you're seeing a lot, and I think they're doing a better job. They're showing, CrossFit showing different videos of, the average Joe working out and the younger person working out and like the 98-year-old. It's like, everyone can do this.
supposed
We
to be
just
for
need to
everybody.
scale
Yeah.
certain things and tailor it to your ability and where you're at.
Yeah.
they're actually in the very, again, earlier publications. I encourage a lot of people who are just kind of into CrossFit now, who weren't back to like OG days, go over a lot of like the free articles on the website. And it's like, you're supposed to be playing sports and do CrossFit 4 or 5 times a week.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I do softball, you do baseball there. Trish and I were just talking about, like, if you had to learn a new sport, get into it, what would you want to get into? I'm like, we should be like a pickleball partnership. Because I want to do something with her as well. Like,
Yeah.
But when you're sport sore compared to fitness sore, and you have to shift left and right, and you need to like backhand a ball between short and third, or you got to catch a frisbee mid-flight, or figure out the depth perception of a 3-point jumper. Like, I just saw Caitlin Clark just pull up and shoot it from the logo, which is so far behind the 3-point line in the WNBA, and she just like nailed it. I'm like, can you imagine that? Like Steph Curry, like, there's a lot of things going on that are expressive about the body, both, you know, neurological and physiological. And this is supposed to be training to help those things.
Right. Should be supplemental to those things, right? That's something that I try to talk to people a lot in the CrossFit world, where I'm like, well, like, this isn't it, you know, if CrossFit is your sport, great, but it should be supplemental to the things that you also want to do. You know, it, like, we have a lot of people that are cyclists or runners or rowers or whatever, right? Like mountain runners and all these things, right? Like, and it should supplement those things to make those things easier and better for you.
Okay, so one of the questions was, what if CrossFit is your sport? I guess
I don't think nothing changes, in my opinion. I mean, then you just should honestly follow the pyramid even stricter. I mean,
well, but you shouldn't be like it. Like you said, it isn't. I'm training every day as I'm like pushing towards the open or the games or anything like that. But you still have to look at it as a sport, and you still need to take time to recover and take time to do all these other things, you know, that build on top of these things.
Do any of you guys play like middle school basketball?
Yeah.
I never played basketball. I was always the tall kid that got picked first, and then they realized I sucked really bad at it, and they were like, I regret this decision immediately.
Yeah.
Anyone who did a high school or like middle school sport, you're like, yeah, practice. We're going to scrimmage for 2 hours.
Loved it.
The fuck you are. You're scrimmaging for 10 minutes if the coach wanted to fit it in after wall sits and suicides and crow hop throws in the outfield. Whatever sport you're thinking of, I guarantee your memory of practices during the weekday is drills.
I love practice though. It was one of my favorite things. Like to go to baseball practice. Like
talking about
I loved it. I looked forward to it.
Yeah.
I would disagree with that, but I mean, I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah,
I hate it. I mean, I love it now as an adult. At the time, it was just like, oh, we're going to work on double plays for freaking 45 minutes. Same thing.
Absolutely loved
it.
A caller question just came in. How much have you been practicing your double unders recently?
Like how? What's
define practice and how much and recently?
What's recently? I mean, there's been shit going on in my life right now, but I mean, not much. I'm sorry to disappoint my fans.
Apologize. No, but I think a lot of these things can also be like how just kind of are we naturally, and what are we willing to go through, and what actually means a lot. Like, I think we always want the fun, sexy things, but these athletes who train 6 hours a day, they're not doing 6-hour Metcons.
No.
And let's kind of navigate towards that, because you and I were talking off camera, and a few people brought it up, probably all of our attention in some passing. We wouldn't call it a complaint, but maybe a curiosity. And this kind of goes into how we program, right? Is everyone wants these Metcons, these sexy looking, just, they look good dressed in that Metcons.
They're fun.
Like, kind of.
Well,
like, every time I feel like I put one in, people are like, that was the hardest thing in my life. And they die.
It's,
and the movement quality goes to shit, to be honest.
It's like pure CrossFit, right? Like, instead of strength and conditioning, skill work, the practice for the actual event that is the Metcon, right?
But what takes longer? Physiological strength development takes just
for sure
so long.
Yeah.
Skills, and then conditioning. Like, we can kind of throw some of that in there. So I think what you wouldn't want to do if CrossFit is your sport and the Open just died, the first thing you should not be getting into, unless it was like the biggest glaring weakness, and even that I would argue strength should be your bias. And I don't just mean 1 rep maxes. Positional strength, static strength.
Endurance strength, yeah.
Because it's like, even that clean and jerk event. Like, if you couldn't do a barbell, okay, this is probably a strength bias issue. But most of these athletes are having 5 minutes of clean and jerks at 245. And when these average games athletes clean and jerks are easily north of 350.
Mm-hmm.
It's like this is, I think Travis Mayer had like a 67%. That was a 67% at 245.
Yeah.
And you have 5 minutes of doing that. This is still like, you need to be strong enough to play. You need to be strong enough to hold positional, but you also need to be kind of like fit.
Yeah.
Right. And so this is why I think you're starting to see the pyramid layered in a certain way. Is you need to work on it all, but you need to be aware of if something is really glaring weakness. Like you have weird arm pulls off the floor, you know, on cleans, you jerk on the row handle, you create tension in areas it shouldn't be because it's not core to extremity, then we need to refine your body movement. We're not saying you're never allowed to work on anything again. It just means like, if you are the kind of CrossFitter, because we all get so many returns early on in our CrossFit career, we're like just slathered in PRs.
The newbie gains.
Right?
Yeah.
Like 6 months, you're like, Jesus, maybe I should start vlogging.
Yeah.
And then you're like, this program sucks. It's like, it's not the program. Very often it's not the program. It definitely could be sometimes somewhere you go, but it's usually like the way you perceive things and approach it. And we want to make sure people are understanding that, like, I think, because one of the questions, let's kind of go back. I know I'm jumping back and forth, but this was, where do you feel people struggle the most on the pyramid?
I'm gonna say nutrition.
Okay.
I mean, just at the base. They either train too much, they don't get enough sleep, they don't eat well enough, and if that foundation is going to be lacking, then everything behind it, or I guess on top of it, is also going to be lacking. So there's two things I don't ever skip. It's a meal and sleep.
You do crush sleep.
Yeah,
Nice.
and I don't sit down. It's not like I sleep 12 hours a day. It's 6 to 8. Prefer that 7.5. 8's a little too much. I start getting anxiety if I start sleeping more than that.
Okay.
But 6 to 8, perfect. But it's every day. I don't care what's going on, vacation, not vacation. If I whatever. You know, I remember there was time I was playing baseball and I was like, man, I'm not getting home to 10. I got to coach
Like,
at 3.
I can coach, but I prefer not
I was
to.
like, I don't want to.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just not going to be me.
Yeah.
You know. So
I'll agree with Josh.
Yeah, good
I
for
think
you
those
too.
things are incredibly important. If we're gonna let's move past that. I think gymnastics positions, people are dog shit, right?
Yeah.
Like if you ask most people to perform a plank or a pull up or just a push up, like they fall apart, you know, or holding a static position.
Because they understand the kind of like the paper definition. Oh, to hold myself up.
Just-
I'm like,
yeah.
yes, but like so much no.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
well, I would say yes on that. And but if I were asked even almost anybody to do like, and we see this with push-ups, everyone can do a good push-up at least 3 or 4 times.
Sure.
But once they get fatigued and once they start getting stress, that's when things start to go to shit.
Yeah.
So, and that's where I think maybe you and me kind of differ on the metabolic conditioning and
Sure.
in the gymnastics. Where if you have the conditioning, then you'd be able to hold that movement pattern maybe a little better longer as well.
Are we considering metabolic conditioning muscular endurance as well? Because that's where I'm at, where I'm like, well, if I can hold this static position for 2 minutes, then I should be able to then also move
because we
away
need to
from
also
that as
consider
well.
like oxygen utilization of
Mhm.
like heart supply and muscle demand and all that stuff.
I'm not a physiologist. Like we don't need to get into it.
Well,
All right, then I won't get into the details, guys. At 5'11", I know when to not flex super hard. No, I mean, but there are certain things of like we need to create like, I always imagine like a big supply of like a water heater at your house, and you have all the pipes turned on, but you have this very small little pump. It's like trickling out,
Sure.
and sometimes you have this huge pump, but like, okay, great, but now your pipes are super small because there's no actual like muscle endurance and familiarity. It's either like I'm just doing long casual things or I'm 1 rep maxing, but there's no like I'm doing rounds of I need to promote like this local lactate like muscle fatigue.
And technically,
that's where a
this
lot of
is
people break down.
metabolic conditioning,
Yeah.
right? Like you are using a different source of energy in this, you know, depending on whatever we're doing, right? Like, and we don't need to get into all the energy pathways. I don't think I could even list all of them at the moment, but they do play into that, you know. And so I again agree. But most people, like if you are like hanging this position for X number of minutes or whatever, you are going to see them fatigue and fail because they don't have the muscular.
We're doing a push pop on muscle ups. I'm gonna tell you guys right now, for 2-ish hours, there's gonna be very little bar muscle ups in the sense of like this is not a scrimmage and we're just gonna throw Hail Marys. We are gonna beat the living shit out of you in hollow positions on the floor, hangs, drills, because that's what's lacking.
Right.
There's like, but I really need this now. I'm like, you competing? They're like, nope. I'm like, cool, you're 47, chill.
Yeah.
I want you to have it because I don't think you should ever be limited by age. It's like, hell yeah, I get it.
Mm-hmm.
We have just a 8 billion people of all ages that can do bar muscle ups with like good form. Fuck yeah. Just a legion of Spartan humans. I think that'd be amazing. But let's really understand the long-term development, because we've had this kind of comparison before of like, if I had a program right now in 1 hour, I can get you to butterfly pull-ups, but 99% of people have died. But you could be the 1%.
Mm-hmm.
Or give me like a year and only like a 5% chance of maybe a sore elbow and a blister, and then you'll have flawless butterflies. Everyone knows what they should pick, but no one behaves that way.
Oh, instant gratification.
Instant. They're like, I'll risk death.
I'll
it's
risk
totally
that.
worth
Yeah.
butterfly pull-ups, in which I have no expression anywhere else outside of this class right
And
now.
we'll never ever need.
Yeah.
Like, so many people want to do them, and I'm just like, you don't need them.
Yeah.
No.
And show some mastery of kipping and control, because the butterfly really just stops there. Kipping goes to other
Translates,
movements
yeah.
and
Mhm.
translates to other movements. So let's talk about the thing that keeps being brought up a little bit, sleep.
Love it.
Awesome.
Would love to get more of
best.
it.
So if we had to not add or take away to these 5 layers, I think if you're going to combine, in your opinion, gymnastics and metabolic conditioning, then I think sleep has to be combined right with nutrition, if not below
Yeah,
it.
I agree.
I mean, of all the modalities of recovery, needling, ice baths, massages from people you know or don't know, saunas, whatever, sleep is like the number one modality there, in my opinion. I don't know if you guys agree here, but if you can give 6 hours plus like a massage and a sauna, or you can get like 7-8 quality hours of sleep with that good nutrition, like you're gonna see everything improve. And it's hard because like all these other things help, don't get me wrong. Like, I do a lot of stuff. I have a monthly massage, we have this dope acupuncturist there, you've helped me stuff. Like, I like sometimes more is better if it's appropriate, but it's not just a fix all to, again, bad habits, bad behaviors, bad movement quality. But if people are just throwing saunas on top of 4 hours of sleep and huge
just like
stress.
Sticking duct tape to the side of the boat and hoping that it sticks for the 1,000-mile journey.
Yeah.
You know, it's like,
Like, we should be fine.
we'll be okay.
What's that leak? It's definitely not the sleep. It's
Yeah.
it's probably my muscle up.
It was, you know, and again, I think I brought this up earlier of like, that's when you have your anabolic phases. That's when we recover. That's where our CNS recovers. That's how, like, I've had really trash nights of sleep. I worked in a bar for fucking ever and would go and try to lift, and 8 out of 10 times like come out with like a little like injury and like I kind of feel like trash after this.
Yeah.
And then the nights where I'm like, oh, I slept amazing, come in and like smash a PR or something like that, where you're just like, oh, I wonder why. Well, I was feeling fucking good, you know? So
I agree, and I originally, when we talked off camera like earlier today, I put nutrition and sleep together. I'd actually create a little sub layer between nutrition and then sleep and then metabolic conditioning, because what you put in your body can affect your sleep. And anybody that's worn a Whoop and maybe drank a couple beers the night before, or maybe
HRV.
the HRV, it just like you just don't sleep well.
Heart
And
rate
it's not
variability.
just alcohol too. It's just anything you put in your body can affect your quality of sleep.
absolutely. Yeah.
So that's why I maybe put it slightly above nutrition, because if we're talking about layers and what can affect one another, nutrition can affect sleep. So, and I don't think sleep can affect nutrition, vice versa, right?
In the sense of like what you then choose to put in your mouth.
Yes. Like, it starts with the base. Like, me not getting enough sleep doesn't affect me.
I'm curious. Let's say you sleep like dog shit, though. You wake up, you're like, give me a cup of coffee and like just give me a croissant. You know, like I think it can maybe impact the way you perceive
Decision making.
decision
But then that
making,
eventually goes in your
So
mouth.
a lot of these things
and
are very
you process it.
subjective.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of tough to be like, this affects, like, yes, nutrition affects sleep 100%. Because I've had, hell, the other night, I think I drank like an ounce of wine, and I was like, I'm awake for an extra hour. And I'm like, I've had, like, what the fuck, So I agree with that.
Like, I don't know if I want to say ideally in a perfect world, all this and that, like never. We're not trying to sit here and say only have almonds and never drink. You know what I mean? Like, you do have one life to live. Take it how you
for
want
sure.
to. But I think if you're an athlete who's done this long enough, multiple years, let's say 3+ years, and you feel like, man, my newbie gains, what the heck? I would say to take an honest assessment. How are we sleeping? What is our stress levels and cortisol levels in real life, dealing with real shit? Sometimes you can't avoid it. Sometimes it's like, well, I guess I could have quit my job. Technically, like, all things are a choice in life, and that's a different conversation. And nutrition and how like, take a look at this pyramid, and I bet if you make more often than not quality, honest adjustments. It's not about never have, a piece of red licorice again, never have a glass of wine.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, be honest. If you're like, I'm only having one tonight, but it's like, is tonight every night?
Right.
Then that's
Yeah.
28 to 31 glasses.
What are your goals? What are
Yeah.
you trying to do here? Like, are you doing CrossFit because you just really enjoy the community
sure.
and working out, and like this is just like a thing that you enjoy doing on like 5 or 6 days out of the week? Are you trying to reach that sport level of whatever? Are you training for another sport? Is this supplemental to those things? Those things all play into this as well. Like, you have to kind of zoom out on that lens and be like, oh, why do I do this? What are my goals?
I mean, most of these chronic diseases we're now dealing with and these comorbidities are from a lot of things we're essentially behaviorally doing to ourselves, from sleep, nutrition, vices, things
Being
like
sedentary.
that. Exactly. So I think if you're actually dealing with something and or you're trying to go to this like top level, regardless of what that top level is for you, then the reality is you're going to have to really refine, especially a lot of these bottom levels. If you're like, no, I'm pretty good there, and like, oh, cool, I made quarterfinals, like, awesome, but like you don't get those panic poops to record your videos, you're just kind of like, whatever, then like maybe you found this good groove. And like sometimes not every day needs to be this feeling of a PR for something to be working and be having a good time, Let's see. Should any aspect take a greater importance as you age? Something I remember that kind of stuck in my mind. The details I'm probably going to biff, so I won't try to articulate it perfectly. But Chris Hinshaw, who does aerobic capacity, was showing that at a certain age in general, a lot of our mobility and ranges of motion shorten down.
First thing that popped in my head.
Yeah, and I figured you would either somewhat agree or fully agree. And that's why you see a lot of these, like the old person run. It's like a shuffle. And so especially in a methodology in which we do want to express strict strength and eventually core to extremity power, if we're now limited in range of motion, but we're asking you to be this explosive firework, but we're all like congested and move poorly, I think we have a higher chance of this, oh man, my shoulder, my joint, my back, my knee. And so I think we can't just expect these strength PRs to always occur, like, oh, 1,000-pound deadlift, knew it, 91 years old, right? So sometimes the PR is like not dipping too much.
Yeah.
It's going to be these skills in gymnastics and movement quality with endurance, especially like as I want to be better and I want to maybe make it to the CrossFit Games is like later. I think if I just don't completely go dog shit in strength, but I can still do like 5-bar muscle ups at 52 and can like row a sub 2-minute split, I bet that's going to put me ahead more than maintaining a certain snatch, but losing those two.
Sure.
And quality of life.
Right.
Yeah.
Because recovery gets a little harder, I get stiffer. So if I'm compounding that with not taking care of my mobility and stretching and just like quality of movement, that's the thing that came to my mind.
Yeah, first thing I was like mobility, right? Like range of motion, control of joint, right? This is also playing into, if we get into like the nitty gritty of it, like degenerative changes as we get older due to stresses on the body. It's going to reduce some of those things, hopefully. Like, I don't have any research to back that, but like I would assume yes, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're not putting those stressors on there due to tight and tender tissues and things like that, then you're probably going to feel better later on in life. And so talking longevity, yeah.
Maybe you have a thought and opinion on this. And one of the questions was, if you're coming back, is there a certain priority based on injury or coming back off time off? I still think it's always good to kind of start from the bottom, work your way up there.
Definitely.
But I also don't like when people have this like, well, my PT said I should pretty much not do anything hard and lift weights. And I'm like, well, depends probably what the injury was, to the extent of it, and what do they interpret as weightlifting, and what do we and you and all that. So you deal with a lot of people in general. It's your job. And you also see CrossFitters a lot. So I don't think doing nothing is good.
Doing nothing, depending on the injury, right? Like if we're dealing with like a muscular strain or like a rotator, or like a tear of something, right? Like doing nothing for a moment is probably a good thing to like let the inflammatory process do its job, take a break, let those tissues kind of heal a little bit. But then we also want to start loading those things and keeping the strength around whatever it was that we're losing. Usually we're talking, 3 to 6 weeks type stuff, depending on severity of injury, and also like what treatment you're getting as well. I try to keep my patients moving because a lot of them like to move, right? Like it's also, now we're starting to talk mental health as well, where it's like,
Oh yeah.
well, this is a big outlet for me. This is how I kind of, get my, not relaxation for the day, but like my disconnect from all the other shit that's going on in my life. So I try not to stop my patients from doing things, but I also like to add a little bit of guardrails and like, hey, let's pump the brakes and let's talk about this long term. Like, what are your goals? What are you trying to do? And is this going to be detrimental in the long term of your life? But a lot of things are isometric loading, eccentric loading, being able to control that position, and then get into the concentrics, and then more dynamic stuff.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like the hierarchy of things,
And
depending
you
on where
actually
they're at.
see a lot of that order in that gymnastics seminar. Should we dare try to tackle one of the questions? I mean, Josh, this is especially towards you.
Just
Yeah,
Josh.
all right.
Yeah.
Oh, we have
no,
10 minutes. Yeah, we definitely. Yeah,
so we can talk about menstrual cycles.
for sure.
Yeah. As three guys, I feel like we would bring in the expertise here.
Gonna nail it.
I have 4 brothers, so I should be an expert on this. Yeah,
I have a
0
sister.
sisters. So
We
Yeah.
talk all the time.
Yeah.
Um,
I worked out next to like 2 women today, so I'm
Yeah.
pretty much an expert now.
Yeah.
No, but I will definitely preface this by saying not my specialty, and I'm just going to give a few things I found because I want to respect all these questions. But what I love, especially about push, is we have some dope ass women and strong MFers. And quick shout out to Adrian and Judy, who made it to the semifinals. And we're talking like top 100, and I think top 150 women in the world.
Dope.
And especially, I think the older we get, it is probably more truly accurate to like that's their number fittest in the world at that. Our age now, there's probably still soccer players who can just outrun us and do some fitness stuff. You know what I mean? That's like, you're also fit. I guess if you tried CrossFit, you could probably do well, or football players. I think we're pretty accurate. That's probably more extremely accurate. So just amazing, huge props to those two ladies in the house. Great job. Golfers clap. The question was, should anything be considered for female athletes during stages of the monthly cycle? So three phases: follicular, ovulatory, and luteal. I will say if you go to WOD Science, I like WOD Science. Follow him on Instagram. He puts out great studies himself and research from other papers from like real peer-reviewed studies here. I went down this rabbit hole, so I tried my best, and I'm going to see if I can answer this a little bit. What seemed to be the consensus on some case studies here is there were definitely perceived effects in different stages, but objectively, not really as much. And so this can kind of be like it depends. How do you personally feel? There seemed to be studies showed athletes most commonly perceived performance to be best in all phases of the menstrual cycle except the early follicular and late luteal phases. And this could be potentially due to increasing of production of serotonin. Some strength difference may occur, given that difference in strength would potentially be greatest between the late follicular and mid luteal phases. But really, when it came to anaerobic and aerobic, so they did some case studies with 100-meter, 200-meter sprints, things of that nature on the more anaerobic side. And then there was different interval and longer continual endurance. There wasn't really objectively huge differences measurably on the anaerobic aerobic side of things. So there was like 5 studies that were like, yep, on strength. 5 were like, no. And 2 were like, I mean, I could see it. So I wanted to throw that kind of information out there. It sounds like it depends. And what is the perceived versus, and I think people handle it differently, as I can only imagine. I mean, some people like eating before a workout, some people don't. That's probably a horrible comparison to what women are actually going through, but it's more of there is, as much as there's stuff out there, a lot more recent ones seem to be showing that the perception is different than the objective testing.
Sure. And I wish we had someone in this room that
Yes.
actually menstruated and could give their own opinion on this, so we don't have to.
Yeah. Trish and Sarah, I'm trying to get you on the podcast.
Yeah.
I keep saying people want you. They don't want like just 3 white guys in a room talking about shit. And they're like, I don't know if they like us. I'm like, a lot more than us.
Yeah.
But
I think you're right. I think it's perceived, right? Like how do you feel? It's going to play like how
an
do you
elite
feel
athletes
before
versus
a sporting event, right? Like
Yeah.
if you're coming in and you're like, man, I just don't feel fresh today.
Yeah.
Like you're probably not going to play as well as you would if you're like, man, feel great, slept great, had good nutrition,
Yeah.
whatever. And like, if you just don't feel well, you're probably not going to put in 100% effort. I think that's more what that is, where if you were being tested, also, I think that plays into this, where it's like kind of set and setting, where it's
Yeah.
like, oh, actually, I'm here to be tested while I'm doing this. So I'm actually going to give a little more effort.
I'm aware of
the circumstance.
the environment
Yeah,
and everything there.
for sure.
I would say the safe answer is just listen to your body. And you said, just because
I love it.
I'm not going to pick a
It's
side.
very, well, I want to touch on. I want to touch
Here's our
on,
opinion, ladies.
Yeah, I mean that's
yes,
the very
whatever you
simple.
want.
Listen to your body.
Yeah.
But you said, maybe you
can
can't
we
give
get you
100%
anything?
effort that day. But like if I go in knowing that I only have 80% of what I have, and I give that 80%, then that's my 100% effort that
sure.
day, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Right. So just because you don't always give what you perceive like your best effort on any single day, doesn't mean you're not also doing your best for that day. So
I don't disagree with that.
Yeah. So just listen to your
What
body.
do you want us to say?
Yeah. Whatever you want to do.
No, but yeah, that sounds to be a little bit of some case studies out there, which I can always go further into and give you those, so I'm not just making that shit up and thinking I am. I'll say one last little thing. I think we have maybe like 5 minutes or 2 minutes or 5 minutes. Just got the heads up. Yeah. To circle back to a question I don't think I answered is what was something you think people don't do as well in the pyramid? I don't think people warm up well.
I love warming people up.
Like we need like I legit didn't even say goodbye today. I just walked out of the gym today. I do this about once every 2 months. I have very like this did not go my way. It felt like a waste of time. Things hurt. I did the equivalent of like an arm stretch across my chest for overhead squat. It was just kind of like, but and I feel really good. Everyone's like, God, Aiden, your warm ups like workouts, and I'm like, okay, like you want CrossFit, and you want to get better, but if you really think about them. Their body weight and their using machine, and you definitely get sweaty, and you need that blood flow out. We're sitting right now. Right now, we're like, oh, I see my organs to function and stay there. But now, every time you eat, okay, we go through a different phase and cycle. We digest. Oh, I just worked out. I need to get out to the muscles to whichever you're working out. So I need to warm up more. And again, if you go back to that WOD Science, he posted an interesting study. They did a 6-minute AMRAP. I believe it was 6 burpee box jump overs, 15 cal row. He's European, so it was like 20 meters, so it was maybe like 60 plus feet of weighted walking lunges, no warm up, and it was pretty much I think it was like a spike from 80 to 180 beats per minute, and it happened pretty quick. And he stayed in that upper echelon for a while, rested 30 minutes, warmed up, retested with the goal of trying to get pretty much the exact same, and started at about 100 beats per minute, peaked at about 170, but it took longer to get into that. So now you have less of a spike, and you don't spike as early on, meaning most of your workout is not in that higher beats per minute of the whole like, So I think, especially as we get older, like let's warm up more. Joints are going to be feeling a little achy and and let's turn these systems on. They're all operating. We talk about kind of pathways and creatine phosphate and glycolytic and oxidative and all that stuff, but it's like, they're all kind of operating, but which one are we expressing and exposing at the time? And we need to kind of prime that. So if you can get to class earlier, some of you bike there, that's great. Like you're already starting to move things around, but like it trust me, I think we all know like, oh, that felt better. And if you sometimes run in late to class, sometimes get on a machine and do that instead of the first part, you'll feel better. You'll move the needle with better quality on the second piece than just feeling obligated to squish on the TV what it is. So I just want to throw that in there. I don't know if you guys...
I've just something anecdotal to add to that, but it kind of plays into it. And just because we competed at that the Slate competition a couple weeks ago, and we were coming into the third event.
About that. We never talked about the podium.
Oh, yeah,
I felt real weird not being on a push team. What a 5'11" dick.
200 pound.
200 pound.
Great shoes.
So, but like we came into the third workout, there was not a lot of time in between events, right? Like, but you're kind of staying warm the entire day. We went and did our floater workout right before the third thing. So like I did this fucking sprint and then came in and like I started snatching almost immediately. I was like, oh, I got to get warm for this snatch because I want to, obviously beat Aiden. And I didn't. Yeah. But I hadn't snatched over 185 pounds in years.
You crushed that. And then we tied.
And like we tied.
Yeah.
But I was in there warming up and like one of the guys on your team walked up and he's like, what are you going to hit? And I'm like, oh man, I think I'm going to open at like 175, maybe hit 185. And like I power snatched 185 in front of him and he was like, why
we did that with like a Hep C bar.
Yeah. They were terrible. Dog shit. And he was like, why would you just snatch the thing that you just snatched? And I was like, well, I'm feeling kind of good, but I was warm. And that was the thing. My body had been primed for that event or for just movement overall, where like everything was firing. And so when people come in and they're like in my class as well, I'm like, I get people sweating and dying. And I'm like, oh, you guys are finally warm because now we can work out.
And we're not being mean. We're not just being trainers. Like, oh, I don't know. Let's just. I'm like, we're just trying to set you up because
Yeah.
today was that horrible day for me, and there was just snatching, and it felt like my body just got taken over by that roach alien and Men in Black. And I was walking down the street all
you were
like
in Edgar
glitched
shirt?
out. Oh my god! I was like, let's snatch, and I was like, nope, my bone just exploded. So
Yeah, one thing I wanted to touch on that I wasn't able to kind of get on. You reminded me when you talked about the push pop and going
Yeah.
over muscle ups, but really learning just the hollow position. And this kind of goes back to the sport. And no matter what sport you're going to do, and if you played a sport, you probably heard this, is mastering the fundamentals. And just with Kobe Bryant, he didn't sit there and do scrimmages every day. He just shot the basketball over and over and over and over.
Just need
you know,
reps.
You perfect it. So I would say, if CrossFit is your sport, I would say probably just master the gymnastics, the fundamentals of movement patterns. And it doesn't have to be really heavy. Go lightweight and just do it until you don't fail.
yeah,
So
I had a wrestling coach that was
Yeah.
like that, and he's like, "We're gonna shoot this 1,000 times before you get to use it on the mat."
yeah.
And I'm like, "Well, that just creates instinct. It creates
mean,
movement."
yeah. Again, I mentioned earlier. Let's work on strength, but like appropriate, like power lifts. If you're gonna do the weightlifting, like Stacy's a great example. She is slow motion tracing her steps. It looks like she has that barbell and she's tracing an outline. When it comes to the skills, we practice them, right? And the last thing I'll probably end on is, and I didn't mention earlier, is the way we kind of view things is we want to make sure you understand the shapes and patterns of things, add the natural speed to it, then we can add load, then we can add complexity, then we can add intensity. And I think a lot of people go about this wrong. So when Stacy's moving real slow with an empty barbell, she's mastering the shapes. And then with the same barbell, she'll do it at full speed. Okay, now I'm moving at the right speed. Okay, now I'll put some load on. Okay, cool. Then I'll worry about a 3-position power snatch complex. Okay, now I'll put it into an EMOM with Echo Bikes. Like layer it appropriately. Layer it appropriately is what I'm going to say there. But shapes before speed, before load, before complexity, before intensity. It takes time, but once you get it, now it's just like, what do you want to do today? That? Awesome, I can.
Yeah,
So,
it feels nice.
Thanks, guys. I
Thanks
think
for
we
having us.
did decent, especially in that last question.
Killed it.
Yeah, any feedback, if it's positive, say it. If it's negative, just don't. We tried.
There's a
I
candy
didn't want
for
to touch it, but they made me.
All right, great. Ooh, slippery slope there.
Oh.
All right, great job. Fitness is neat.